The following program is brought to you in living color.
Hi, I'm Tony Figueroa, the Child of Television, and welcome to another edition of This Week in TV History. Now, you can read my blog, childoftelevision.blogspot.com, and you can listen to me on TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television, hosted by my good friend Ed Robertson. And today I wanted to discuss The Tonight Show, but not the entire franchise, although I do want to get into some aspects of that, but the era that was hosted by Jack Paar. Now, I first learned about Jack Paar actually from watching shows like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. So remember, this was the 1970s, and we're talking about a show set in the 1950s, and there were often jokes made about this guy named Jack Paar. You know, Marion Cunningham would say, "Oh, Howard likes to watch Jack Paar. He wants to see if Jack Paar is going to cry." And so when the commercial break would come on, I would ask my mom, "Who's Jack Paar?" And she would say, "Oh, he was the Tonight Show host before Johnny Carson." I didn't know there was a Tonight Show host before Johnny Carson. Yeah, so Steve Allen started in 1954, and just between Steve Allen and Jack Paar, there was this experiment called Tonight, America After Dark, and it was hosted by Jack Lasculi, who came from the Today Show. The intent of Tonight, America After Dark was to be a nighttime, a late-night version of the Today Show. They were going to change the format a little bit, and that failed. And unfortunately, when the show failed, they lost a lot of sponsors. So when Jack Paar came in to kind of, course correct what the Tonight Show should be, it did have some challenges, one of them being the lack of sponsors. He also had an announcer, Franklin Pangborn, who you see in some of the YouTube videos, if you look back in any historical footage. He's the first announcer, and you see him on camera saying, "Welcome to the new Tonight." Yeah, he only lasted a few weeks. He didn't have the same spontaneity that they needed for, the announcer/sidekick. So his role was taken over by Hugh Downs, who we would later know as the host of the Today Show. And the show was done out of Studio 6B. He was the first Tonight Show host to do that. This is significant because that's where Johnny Carson would also do his first 10 years of the Tonight Show, and it's where Jimmy Fallon is currently doing the Tonight Show. I wish there was more footage of Jack Paar's interviews and some of the stuff that went on, because unfortunately, preservation was not a high priority at that time. A lot of the tapes were erased so they could be used over and over again. Jack Paar did a lot of stuff that was historic and controversial. He did like having politicians and journalists on. He liked to debate. So unlike Johnny Carson and Steve Allen, he did like that controversy. So when he would be on, he would want to debate and criticize different columnists in various newspapers. We're talking about people like Walter Winchell, for example. In fact, Walter Winchell's career really did suffer because of Jack Paar's on-air criticism. But there were several other things that Jack Paar did that were highly controversial. He interviewed Fidel Castro in Cuba after he rose to power. So this was the last time an American talk show host went to Cuba until Conan O'Brien in 2015. But it was rather controversial at the time, and rightfully so. He's interviewing Castro like he's some celeb hosting a movie. Also, I don't blame Jack Paar for this part, but he did have to escort a drunk Mickey Rooney off the show. My dad told me about this. Apparently, Mickey was drunk, and he said a lot of stuff that you can't say on television, but it went over the air because a lot of times it was live. If you ever see the first one, where Franklin Pangborn says, "And it's live from New York," it was live. I guess they didn't have any tape delay, so some of George Carlin's words went right over the airways back then. Jack Paar also did a show from the Berlin Wall when the wall came up. So can you imagine doing a show in Cuba with Castro and then doing a show in Berlin? I mean, there are challenges doing that type of show today. But can you imagine back then? I mean, with the lack of satellite technology, the way that shows were done, I mean, it's pretty impressive that they were able to pull that off. But I'd say the biggest controversy with Jack Paar, if you ask people from that generation, would be his water closet joke. Water closet, by the way, is a polite term that people used back then for restroom, the water closet, or the WC. And it is bathroom humor. It's a lengthy joke. I'm not going to read the whole joke. You can easily find it online. But the joke was very prominent in his monologue. And at the time that he did the monologue joke, the show was not live. They were actually trying this new thing about filming the show late afternoon and then airing it at late night. And it wasn't quite 11:30 yet. Can you imagine? Those shows were an hour and 45 minutes. So when he was at home and watching the broadcast of the show, he noticed they cut out this water closet joke. And he was very unhappy. And he had discussions with the network. The response was, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done it. It wasn't offensive, but just, let's not make a big deal out of it. Why don't you just kind of make a joke and kind of move on? And Jack Paar did not want to do that. In fact, he went on the next night, and he brought up the fact that the joke was cut out. And he said, there's got to be a better way to make a living, and walked off the show, leaving Hugh Downs to finish the show. Now, sometime later, he did negotiate with the network. He did come back, and he made a comment. Well, I said that there's got to be a better way of making a living. Well, I looked. And he came back. He continued the show until 1962. So Jack Paar really was a pioneer in television. I wish there was more footage of what he contributed to the Tonight Show franchise, let alone the history of late night television, let alone the history of television. But it was taking a toll on him trying to do what would be an hour and 45-minute show. So anyway, if you can find footage of Jack Paar, look it up. He was a master at interviewing, and I think we see his style in people like Jon Stewart today. And once again, you could hear me on TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television. You can read my blog, childhoodtelevision.blogspot.com. I'm Tony Figueroa. Stay tuned.